Snyder's last trumpet. Salina, Kansas, sits in the middle of the plains in a way that feels deliberate, as if the land itself decided this was a place where stories should settle. During the day, it looks ordinary. Brick storefronts downtown, quiet streets, the smoky hill river moving without urgency. But at night, especially after midnight, Salina feels older than it should. The wind moves differently there. It doesn't just pass through, it lingers, presses against buildings, slips down alleys, and carries sounds farther than they should travel. That was what first caught the attention of the investigative team. They hadn't come to Salina because of an elephant. The group specialized in historical paranormal investigations across Kansas and the surrounding states. Old towns, abandoned schools, forgotten theaters, places where documented history left unanswered questions. In the weeks before Salina, they had been working on a case tied to downtown, reports of unexplained noises near several early 20th century buildings, whispers echoing between brick walls long after businesses closed, and a recurring claim that people heard crowds where no one was present. Downtown Salina made sense for that kind of work. Many of the buildings dated back to the late 1800s and early 1900s, built when the town was growing fast on railroads, agriculture, and passing travelers. Layers of history stacked on top of each other. Perfect conditions, they thought, for residual sounds, memories of a place replaying themselves. They arrived quietly, staying in a small hotel a few blocks from the historic district. The first nights were uneventful in a way that investigators recognized well. Long stretches of silence, notes taken, equipment running. Occasional sounds easily explained by wind, traffic, or old buildings settling. They documented it all anyway. That was part of the process. Patience. On the fourth night, everything changed. It was just after 1 a.m. when the sound first cut through the stillness. Low, drawn out, not mechanical, not wind, not anything they had heard before. At first, they thought it might be a train horn carried oddly by the air. Salina had rail lines after all. But this sound didn't fade the way a train did. It swelled, dipped, and carried an uneven, almost organic quality. It felt closer than it should have been. Then it came again. Longer this time, deeper, and unmistakably animal. One investigator froze mid-sentence. Another slowly lowered their flashlight. No one spoke for several seconds, all of them listening as the sound rolled through the empty downtown streets. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't sharp. It sounded mournful, heavy, like something calling out into open space and waiting for an answer that never came. Then, faintly, so faint it was almost worse, they heard something else layered beneath it. Human voices, not clear words, not shouts you could understand. Just the sound of many people at once rising and falling, like a crowd reacting to something unseen. It echoed between buildings, distorted by distance and architecture, as if the sound itself didn't quite belong to the present. The investigators didn't run. They didn't speak. They followed the sound. Step by careful step, they moved through downtown, tracking where the noise seemed strongest. The streets were empty. No cars, no pedestrians, nothing to explain what they were hearing. And yet, every few minutes, the sound returned, the deep, resonant cry, followed by that unsettling swell of voices. One of them finally said what they were all thinking. "That sounds like an elephant." The word felt absurd as soon as it was spoken. An elephant had no reason to be anywhere near downtown Salina. Not now, not ever. And yet, no one argued. The sound was too specific, too heavy, too unmistakable once the idea was there. The cries continued for nearly 20 minutes. Then, just as suddenly as they had begun, they stopped. The silence afterward felt unnatural, like the town itself was holding its breath. They returned to their hotel, shaken, reviewing audio recordings that, frustratingly, captured only fragments. Low vibrations, faint echoes, nothing that fully conveyed what they had heard with their own ears. Still, the experience was enough to shift the direction of their investigation entirely. The next morning, they went looking for answers. Salina's archives weren't difficult to find. Local libraries, historical societies, old newspaper records, all meticulously preserved. At first, they searched for anything that might explain animal sounds downtown. Escaped livestock, traveling shows, parades. Then, buried in early 20th century headlines, they found it. September 1920. The Sells Floto Circus had come to Salina. Circuses were major events then. Entire towns turned out to see them. Parades through the streets, tents raised on open land, exotic animals that most people would never otherwise encounter. And among those animals was an elephant named Snyder. According to the records, Snyder had been a working circus elephant, accustomed to crowds, noise, and travel. On the day the circus arrived, something went wrong. Accounts varied on the exact cause: stress, noise, confusion, but they all agreed on the outcome. Snyder became agitated. The newspapers described a scene of sudden chaos: an elephant breaking free, wagons damaged, equipment scattered, handlers struggling to regain control as Snyder moved through the circus grounds and nearby areas. The language was dramatic but factual, the tone reflecting both fear and awe at the sheer power of the animal. There were no confirmed fatalities recorded in the archives the team reviewed. What stood out instead was how long the situation lasted and how deeply it unsettled the town. Attempts to calm Snyder reportedly failed. The event stretched into hours. Eventually, the situation ended and the circus moved on. But Salina did not forget. The investigators noticed something else as they continued reading. Several accounts mentioned the sound. Witnesses described Snyder's trumpeting echoing across town late into the night, a sound that carried farther than expected. A sound people remembered years later, not because of what they saw, but because of what they heard. One article mentioned residents waking in the early morning hours, unsure where the noise was coming from, only that it felt wrong, out of place in the quiet Kansas night. As the team pieced together the story, the connection became unavoidable. The sound they had heard downtown wasn't random, it wasn't new, it matched descriptions written more than a century earlier. That night, they returned to the same streets. They positioned themselves near buildings that had existed in 1920, structures that would have stood during the circus's visit. Brick walls that had absorbed sound for generations. They waited. Just after 2 a.m., it happened again. The cry rolled through the air, low and resonant, vibrating faintly in their chests. It seemed to come from everywhere at once and nowhere specific. The investigators stood perfectly still, afraid that movement might somehow interrupt it. This time, the sound lasted longer. The elephant's call rose, then broke slightly at the end as if strained. Beneath it came the layered noise of human voices again. Panic, confusion, awe. Not screams in the traditional sense, but the sound of many people reacting to something they couldn't control. The team listened, recording everything they could, though they already knew technology would never fully capture it. This wasn't just sound, it was presence. They stayed until dawn. In the days that followed, they spoke to longtime residents. Older locals shared stories they'd heard growing up, about strange noises on quiet nights, about parents warning children not to wander downtown after dark, about an elephant that some swore could still be heard if the wind was right. No one claimed to see anything. It was always the sound. The investigators eventually concluded their work in Salina, documenting their findings carefully. They never claimed definitive answers. They didn't label it a ghost in the traditional sense. What they suggested instead was something more unsettling, a residual echo of an event so loud, so emotional, and so disruptive that it imprinted itself on the place. A memory that refused to fade. Even now, long after the circus wagons are gone, and Snyder's name exists mostly in archives and museums, the town still listens. On certain nights, when the streets are empty and the wind moves just right, something carries across the prairie, a deep, distant cry. And if you hear it, if you hear the layered voices beneath it, it might not be meant for you at all. It might simply be history replaying itself, unaware that time has passed. Or it might be something else entirely, because some sounds don't belong to the past. They're still searching for a place to go.